finally time for me to go over my trip to the 2025 Singapore Grand Prix. I'm so sorry it took me so long to upload this, but I've been going through a lot of struggles since I got back from my trip, and I just wasn't able to find the time or the energy to put this video together. So you're probably seeing this almost a month after the Grand Prix. So, yeah, I'll try and quickly go through kind of the stuff that I did in the days leading up to the Grand Prix and then spend a little bit more time on the Grand Prix itself and what I thought of it. This trip was actually my first time I'd ever gone to Asia. I've only ever been to Europe or North America before, so was very excited about that. One thing I wasn't excited for though was the 16-hour plane ride from Vancouver to Singapore. Easily the longest flight I've ever been on. Ugh, yeah, it was definitely a struggle, especially with the time change and all that, to not get hit with jet lag. I think I did a pretty decent job though of kind of pushing my bedtime the couple days before I left for my trip. So actually the transition going to Singapore wasn't too bad, but the jet lag coming back I didn't do a very good job with, and that's partially why it's taken me so long to put this video out. I was jet lagged for a solid like 2 weeks after my trip. But anyways, yes, so I left Vancouver right around midnight on, I guess, the night between the 28th and the 29th. And then with the 16-hour flight plus the time change, I actually landed in Singapore on September 30th. So September 29th was not a date that existed for me, basically. Yeah, and so I landed in the airport, and immediately the attraction there is the Jewel. And it's literally right in the airport. It's like this giant, I guess it's kind of like a giant outlet mall in a way, but it has this giant water fountain in the middle of it. And it was here that I got my first taste of Singapore's humidity, which was absolutely brutal. I had like a t-shirt and some like Lululemon joggers on, and immediately I was sweating buckets. It was brutal. So I went to like the washroom and changed immediately, but then still managed to sweat through that. And it took me a solid like 2 days to like acclimate to the humidity. But yeah, so I went and did that and then had to wait around until 10 a.m. for them to turn on the waterfall. A couple nice people got a nice picture of me. And so that was kind of my first introduction to Singapore, and easily the nicest airport I've ever been in. It's just so many like neat features to it. Like there was this one area that had the underside of a pond like on a screen on the ceiling, and so you felt like you were like underwater. A lot of like plants and vegetation all over the airport, and yeah, just really nice airport. Yeah, so then after I got my luggage sorted and got some currency, I went on to the metro system there, which there's a line that runs from the airport all the way downtown to where my hotel was. So I ended up staying in this area of Singapore called, I think it's called Bugis or something along those lines. I might not be pronouncing it correctly, but it was a very central location and very close to the track. So if you're looking for something that's a little cheaper and close to the track, I'd say this was a really good area to go to. Like after the track sessions, I was able to just walk back to my hotel. Didn't have to worry about getting onto the MRT in time. Didn't have to worry about getting any kind of transportation to and from the hotel, which was good for the budget, bad for my back. So, yeah, we'll get into that later. Yeah, so got to the hotel and was able to leave my luggage in the main lobby. They weren't able to check me in until about 3 p.m. And at this point, it was like 11 noon-ish. So I dropped that all off and then decided I would take a walk around the waterfront at Marina Bay. Now, something I learned very quickly on this is that it is very blocked off. You cannot easily get to the waterfront. Like there's tracks like the concrete barriers and the go like all the way down the streets, and so you have to find crosswalks to be able to cross. And then even then it's still blocked off on the other side. And so unfortunately I made the mistake of turning the wrong way, trying to find a gap in the barriers to be able to get to the waterfront. And so I ended up walking like all the way up north past where the wharf stage is, where they do like the driver fan forum, and past like the pit lane and the main straight until I finally hit grass where I could get like right up to the waterfront. Came to learn later that like basically the waterfront is completely blocked off from where I ended up to kind of where the base of the track is. Like they don't allow anyone to walk in zone 1 at all throughout the weekend, but zone 4 is open when there isn't track sessions happening, or at least like in the lead up to the race, because I guess they want to keep the area where the drivers and the teams are like contained and like patrolled by security for the weekend, which makes sense. But yeah, I didn't realize that they actually like took up the area of the waterfront that you could walk on if you were a tourist. So yeah, so I ended up walking all the way up there, and I was like, oh, I wanted to kind of see this stretch of the waterfront anyways, so I kind of followed the path up there. But by this point, I'd been standing on the concrete streets. I was sweating. My body was not acclimated to the environment, and I could just feel like the beginning signs of like heat stroke coming on, and I was like, ooh, this isn't good. So I hopped on back onto the MRT and then took it back to where I passed where I had been before and into the kind of the main area of the city, and then finally managed to get my way across the track to the waterfront area and was able to see a view of the Marina Bay Sands, the Singapore Flyer, the big Ferris wheel, and then the Merlion statue as well. And I had stopped for a burger to kind of cool down in the AC, which I think was the most important thing I did that day, because after that I just felt so much better and was able to kind of wander around a bit more. But yeah, so I kind of saw like the initial sights there. And then once 3 p.m. hit, I head back to my hotel to shower and change, and the midday shower became a very recurring theme of my trip because it was very essential. I found that like I could handle the heat and humidity kind of in the morning up until about noon, and then between noon and 5 p.m. I was like, I cannot be in the heat at all. So I tried to like stay inside during that time of day, and then after 5 p.m. once the sun kind of went down a little bit, it got a little cooler again and it was more tolerable. So just something to keep in mind if you're in Singapore, like the heat definitely is a factor. And I think for me it was more so the humidity and the fact that like your body just cannot cool down. And drink a lot of water. That was also key for me. I carried a water bottle around with me the whole weekend and made sure that I kept hydrated because I was sweating so much and still like probably wasn't drinking enough. So yeah, that was very brutal. After that, I had booked a hawker market tour for the evening. And so I went to Chinatown to meet up with the tour guide, and I was on a tour with another couple who was there for F1. So I chatted to them about that for a lot of it. Yeah, I think they were both McLaren fans, more so of Lando than Oscar. So I just like kept pretty tight-lipped about how much I dislike Lando. And then there was also a family of 5. And so we stopped in and got some, can't remember exactly what it's called, but it was like kind of like jerky, I guess you would say, like dried candied meat. And that was really, really good. A great snack. And then we stopped in at a coffee place and they kind of gave us an overview about like what the coffee culture is like around Singapore. There's a lot of like Malaysian coffee there, so they call it kopi. And then there's this type of drink that they make. It's called Wan Wong, I think. I don't think I'm pronouncing that right. But it's basically half tea, half coffee. And so that became my favorite drink of the trip because I'm much more of a tea drinker, but I wanted to kind of have the coffee and it was quite tasty. And you could also put like tapioca pearls in it as well. And then they also served us some kaya toast, which became my favorite breakfast item. And I actually brought back so much kaya from my trip. I'll grab a bottle. So this is kaya. It's made of sugar, eggs, coconut milk, and pandan. And pandan is it's a plant. It's kind of looked like kind of an onion related plant, I guess. It had like green onion, where it had these kind of longer green stalks, and I guess they put it into this, and this is so tasty. It's on bread, and you just put some butter and bread and just eat it. And they would dip it into a soft-boiled egg, and that was kind of the meal that they did. I can't really eat straight eggs, so I had to kind of not do that part of it, but the toast itself, delicious. I brought so much of this back. If you're ever in Singapore, highly recommend getting kaya toast. I'm obsessed with it now. And then in the Chinatown area, there was also a bunch of really cute murals, and a lot of them were painted by the same guy, and you could tell because there would be a cat in the mural. So I was spending a lot of the time while I was around there looking at the murals and trying to spot the cat, which was very fun. But Chinatown, just a lot of history. The tour guide went over like kind of the history of the ethnic makeup of Singapore and how it has both Malay, Chinese, and Indian influences. And then our final stop on the tour was at a hawker market, which are very popular in Singapore. There's quite a few around. I actually found myself that I wasn't that hungry on my trip. I think I was just so hot and so thirsty all the time that I just like food wasn't really what my body was wanting. So I drank a lot of juice and a lot of water, and always had a big breakfast at the hotel. The hotel provided a free breakfast, so I'd always really load up then and then just have one other meal kind of later at night. But yeah, the hawker market was really neat. It feels a lot like a food court, except for each kind of booth specializes in one item. So you'd kind of go to different stalls to get different items. And so we got so much food on this tour. Like, I highly recommend it. I'll put a link in the description of if you want to go on this tour if you're ever in Singapore. It was just, yeah, really well done. The tour guide was really energetic. And we just got so much food. Like, I was so full by the end of it. I was having to reject items that she was bringing us. I was like, I can't eat this. But yeah, tried some like sugarcane juice. We had rice with chicken. We had some they were like spring rolls, but they contained like samosa mix. So those are really tasty. And then we also went and got some mooncakes for dessert because it was the mooncake festival kind of in that time while we were there. So I'm not a huge fan of mooncakes. They have them a lot in Vancouver as well because we have a very large Asian population here. And I just don't like the texture and consistency of it, unfortunately. So I tried it there again, but yeah, same thing. So yeah, my favorite thing I tried on that was probably the peanut satay though. I love a good satay, and they were very, very tasty. So I got that quite frequently because it was a big chunk of protein that would be what I needed to have energy throughout the day. I didn't really eat that many carbs while I was there. Yeah, the only downside of the tour was that I unfortunately missed the meet and greet that they had with Alex Albon at the fan zone for Williams. I was kind of bummed about that, but just the timing didn't quite work out. So I did pop by the Williams fan zone a little later in the week, and they just had a bunch of those reaction time games and some t-shirts and stuff, but I didn't hang around long. I had meant to go back at some point during my trip, but I just never ever made it back there. So kind of bummed about that too. I think, yeah, I have a few regrets about my trip, I will say. I'll try to get into that at kind of the end of the trip. Yeah, so that was kind of the first day in Singapore. So once the tour was done, I was exhausted after basically not getting any sleep on the flight, and kind of having to push myself all the way through the first day to kind of adjust my sleep schedule. So I went to bed by probably 8 p.m. So day 2, since I went to bed so early, I ended up waking up super early. I think I woke up at 3 in the morning. So I just kind of hung around, got caught up on a few TV shows, wrote in my journal for the first day until breakfast at 7 started at the hotel. So I went down and grabbed that. And then I was like, okay, I'm up super early today, so I may as well do something that needs a lot of time. And so I decided to do kind of a walk, kind of a hike in this area of Singapore called the Southern Ridges. And so I was able to bus out to where it is and walk up through a lot of like a jungled area. And so it was quite crazy actually. Like I never figured out what the noise was, but there was this crazy buzzing noise like all over the place when you're in the jungle. I don't know if it was bugs or birds, but it was just constant. And so I was hoping to be able to use the walk to kind of like just admire the scenery and think, but the buzzing was so annoying that I was like, okay, I gotta like put headphones and music on for this because I can't handle this. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, I managed to walk up to the top of the ridges and kind of wander around, get some nice views of Singapore. So you kind of had the city on one side of the ridge, and the other side of the ridge, you kind of got the harbor and the ocean, basically. So it was kind of neat to see that. From where up there, there's also the gondola that goes over to a place called Sentosa Island. And that's kind of where a lot more of the more like kind of entertainment things are. So they have like the aquarium, they have Universal Studios over there, they got like bungee jumping, and a whole bunch of other stuff like that. If I had another couple days in Singapore, I might have gone to Sentosa, but it wasn't really super high on my list of things to do. I'm much more interested in kind of seeing kind of the cultural aspects of a place and kind of just being in the city and kind of trying to imagine what my own life would be if I ever lived there. Like, I find that very interesting. I just really want to get a sense of a place, and I find that's better by kind of walking around, seeing different neighborhoods, going to museums, and kind of experiencing the public transit and just kind of all that kind of stuff. Like, I find that much more interesting in cities than kind of going for entertainment things that you can kind of get anywhere in the world. So that was kind of my philosophy with it. But yeah, so I kept going on the Southern Ridges, and then there's a section of it called the Harrison Waves, and it's this really neat bridge. It connects kind of one set of the ridges to another, and just a really neat architectural bridge. Like it kind of looked like a wave, and they had a bunch of like wooden kind of boards under the wave section. You could like sit on it. So there was a lot of people just kind of hanging around there and kind of enjoying the weather and the view and just kind of sitting there, and a lot of people exercising in this area. Unfortunately, the next section of the ridges was called the Forest Walk, but it was down for renovation. Apparently there had been a bit of a landslide or some like soil erosion in that section, and so they had it closed down to kind of repair it, which unfortunately, I think I wish I would have just stopped at this point and turned around and went back, because I ended up having to walk all the way down to the streets, along the street, and then back up. So it added an extra amount of elevation to my hike. Plus, it was just like, wasn't really worth it. And then all of the sections afterwards weren't quite as good as the first two sections. So if that section is back up and running, I would say do the Southern Ridges, but if it's still down when you're there, might not be worth it. After that section, there was kind of a garden. It was kind of interesting. It was like, it seemed like a community garden, but also maybe like an artist's garden where they had like little areas that each was kind of designed differently. So they had someone come in to design it. So maybe it was like a landscaping design or something. I don't know. It was kind of interesting, but they had little areas. So one of them was kind of kitchen themed. So they had a lot of herbs and like a seating area. And then another one had like a big gazebo in it. And then one was like focused on one type of plant. And then one was like a kind of like a swampy area. So that was kind of neat. If you're into plants, that might be worth it. I'm not super into plants. So I was like, whatever, I'll just keep walking. And then got up, headed to another section. And this had some of the elevated pathways, which was what the forest walk was. So I kind of went in and along that for a little bit. And then we got into the final section, which kind of had a big lake. And so went down and walked around the lake a little bit, and then went and found a bus stop to head back to the hotel, because by this point I was really tired and my back was starting to hurt. Which I was like, oh no, not this again, because yeah, I've gone on previous trips where I have managed to injure my back during them, and it has meant that the rest of the trip has been complete and utter torture because I'm just in so much pain after half an hour of walking around. And so this was kind of my first sign that something might be wrong. So yeah, I went back to the hotel, and I meant to shower and then grab some food and then go to the night safari in the evening, which is something that happens at the Singapore Zoo. And there were several evenings where I intended to go to the night safari, but I just never made it to it. This occasion, it was because I was feeling so tired and jet lagged, and my body was hurting, and I just didn't have the energy to do anything. So I ended up calling an early night there and just finished up a book that I was reading and wrote more in my journal. And then I think I went to bed at like 6. I was just so tired. Yeah, so that was day 2, and I was just feeling, I was going through it a little bit on that day. I think I was just so tired and just emotionally drained, and yeah. So it was a bit of a rough night, but I was like, okay, I'll just go to bed and I'll get up early tomorrow, have a good start, and then make the most of day 3. And so that's what I ended up doing. And day 3 was it was easily the longest day of the trip, but also my most enjoyable and the one that I packed the most in. And I just saw so many things that day that were very fun. So yeah, day 3. So this day I got up early again for breakfast and then headed out to the kind of cultural areas. So the area I went to first was called Kampong Glam, and it's kind of the Malay area of Singapore. And they have this one section of it called Haji Lane, and it's this really narrow alleyway, and it's just either side are just covered in shops. Unfortunately, I learned this day that Singapore's operating hours are very different to other countries. So their operating hours tend to be between like 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. But yeah, I soon learned that you cannot really start early in Singapore because of the open times of businesses. So when I got to Haji Lane, everything was closed. So I just kind of wandered down it and checked out the shops and kind of what was going on. There was one Mexican place that was really decorated with F1 merch. So that was kind of neat to see. And yeah, so I just headed down that lane, and then I was like, okay, maybe I'll come back here later when it's actually busy. They also had like a big temple there, so I got a few photos of that, and kind of got a sense of that area of town. And then I headed to Little India, which was a little bit of a walk away, and wasn't quite as big as Kampong Glam. I'd say of the 3 areas, would being Kampong Glam, Chinatown, and Little India, I think there was the least amount to kind of see in Little India. There was this really neat temple that had a bunch of like decorations on it. They were kind of little, I want to say it was a Hindu temple, but a lot of little figurines on it, very neatly decorated, although a lot of it was kind of covered with scaffolding, so I wonder if they were kind of repairing it. So unfortunately I didn't really fully get to see it. And yeah, I just kind of walked around there, kind of saw the main street of it. They had like a bunch of flower decorations above the street, and it also looked like there was some sort of like night market happening there, which could have been cool in the evenings, but I was kind of like, I was kind of underwhelmed by that section of Singapore, unfortunately. And then after that, I was like, okay, kind of seen these 2 areas and looking for something cooler to do in kind of the midday. So I took the MRT back to the downtown area and kind of wandered along the stretch of the waterfront they call the Clark Quay. They have a bunch of restaurants on one side, and the other side just kind of has a lot of walkway, and that kind of goes up to where the start of the Grand Prix area was. So I kind of wandered along there, and there was a museum there that I really wanted to see called the Asian Civilizations Museum that kind of went into kind of the history of trade between different areas of Asia and kind of how Singapore kind of plays a role in all of that. And they had an exhibit on that was about the history of games in Asia, which I was like super interested in looking at. I'm big into board games, big into like D&D and that kind of stuff. And so I was like, oh, I really want to go to this. But fortunately, it didn't open until 10. And at this point, I think it was still like 9:30. So I ended up wandering past that and into the F1 area to kind of get a lay of the land. So this was all kind of the Zone 4 section of the track. So I got to see where the stage was, and I went and saw like the SGP kind of lettering that they had and took some pictures of that. I saw the bridge that's on the Singapore track. And then I kind of wandered through where it's called the Esplanade. It's like kind of their arts area where they have like concerts, so more like orchestral or kind of that kind of thing. And then once 10 o'clock rolled around, I headed back to the museum and checked out the exhibit on the games. And a lot of it really interesting, just like didn't realize how many board games I played when I was little that had origins in Asia. So it was like backgammon, obviously Go. There's one called Mancala, I think, which is actually, I think, from Africa originally. There's a version of it that they played in Asia. And also Snakes and Ladders. That one was really interesting. I guess it's like supposed to be teaching children about like being a good person will get you closer to heaven, and then sins are the snakes that bring you down and further away, which was like very interesting. And then also chess. And I think the coolest part of this exhibit was they had these little robots that you could play against in chess. And I don't really play that much chess. It's never been one that I'm very good at. I can't picture things in my head, and so I find it hard to think ahead in chess. So I set it to the lowest difficulty level and absolutely obliterated this machine. So down with AI. But it was just so cool. Like it had like a camera that would be able to tell where all the pieces are and would see you play it, and then it would be able to analyze the board, and then it had a little robot arm that would go down, pick up the piece, and move it to where it wanted to go. And just so cool. Would love one of those. And then you could like choose what level based on like whatever the chess number means. And you could like play it from like level 200 to level 2500 or whatever it goes up to. So it was like very, very cool. And yeah, I think my favorite thing of the museum, and made the entry fee worth it for me. So after that, I joined like a English guided tour of the rest of the museum. Wasn't quite as interesting. It was just a lot of like stuff about like there was this like one shipwreck that they basically featured a lot of the museum on, about items in the shipwreck that they managed to recover, kind of showing the trade that happened between Asian countries. There was a little bit about like how Christianity kind of came into Asia a little bit, and kind of how it was really rejected in a lot of areas. I'm not huge into religion, but it was interesting. So after this, it was around noon. I was starting to get really hungry, so I walked over to probably the most famous hawker center in Singapore, and it's called La Pausat. And really, really neat area. Just they had this like covered building with a big clock in it, and just like had all of these different wings and sections of booths for the food. So I ended up just getting satay again because I was craving in the moment. But unfortunately, I went there during lunchtime, and it's literally like right downtown, like smack in the middle of all of these giant, gorgeous, futuristic buildings. And it's this like tiny little kind of hut-like building kind of just in the middle of it, which is really, really funny. But yeah, just like completely packed full of like businessmen. when I was there, and I was like, maybe I should have come to this at like a time that wasn't so busy. But yeah, I think I wish I would have gone back to it at some point during the week. But again, I'll get into that later. Yeah, so I hit that up, and then I had to run back to the hotel to shower and change into a nice outfit. And then I made my way over to the Marina Bay Sands area and to the gardens by the bay. At this point, it had decided to start raining a little bit. So I bought the Gardens by the Bay ticket just for the Cloud Forest and Flower Dome. So there are these two kind of domes there that you need to get tickets for that had like kind of different kinds of vegetation in them. And then they also apparently acted as like rainwater collection for the rest of the gardens, which I found kind of interesting. They're very focused into making things more sustainable in Singapore. So went to the Cloud Forest first. I think this might have been my favorite attraction that I went to. You basically go in there and they have this like giant like pillar of like vegetation and a bunch of like walkways kind of going around it. But then they had kind of an exhibit on at the moment that was Jurassic Park themed. So they had a bunch of like these animated dinosaurs like in it. And it actually made sense with like the feel of the Cloud Forest. But just like a lot of like high altitude plants, a lot of like really neat flowers. They had a section with like carnivorous plants, so like Venus flytraps and like those ones that have like the light in the bottom of them that like can eat bugs. So yeah, all just like very interesting. And kind of wandered around that. I didn't spend as much time in there as I maybe would have wanted because I had to get to a dinner reservation. So I kind of walked through it quite quickly. And my back was also hurting again. So I was dealing with that. And then, oh my God, I had this moment. I'll just show the video here of what happened. Oh my God. So I was literally on like 3% battery, freaking out because I was like, oh my God, I forgot my power bank at my hotel room. And I'm trying to get through the Gardens of the Bay today and going to Lavo for dinner. And I was like, I am gonna lose my mind if my phone dies. And I was gonna like run back to the mall and buy a power charger. But then I just like randomly happened across one of those like rentable phone charger things and managed to get it set up with 2% battery left, and now my phone is charging. And I'm like, wow, I feel like the universe gave me a gift right now, and I am so grateful. So yeah, I'm so grateful that this existed in Singapore, these portable charging stations, because if they hadn't, I don't know what I would have done, because I would have absolutely lost it if I did not have a functional camera for my dinner on top of the Marina Bay Sands, because the whole reason I was doing this was to get the great view from the top of the hotel. Oh, so thank God that was there. And yeah, it was like fairly cheap too. It was only like $2 an hour to rent. So I had my dinner, and then once the charger was empty, I like just returned it, and I paid like $6 to rent this charger. It was great. Highly recommend. We need these in North America. Yeah, so I went to the dinner at, there's two different restaurants on top of the Marina Bay Sands. There's C'est La Vie, which is more of kind of like a chiller, relaxing, like kind of nightclub bar area, and it's on one side of the tower, kind of closer to where the track is. And then the other side was the restaurant I went to called Lavo, and it's a Italian restaurant. It had just gone under renovations apparently, and so it was only open for a couple weeks. So I think that was probably the only reason why I was even able to get a reservation, because I think I only booked it like a couple weeks out from my trip, and usually you need to book like several months in advance to get space there. So yeah, I went up there, had a nice fancy cocktail, and had a pizza for dinner. Wasn't the best pizza I'd ever had, unfortunately. I wish I would have picked something from their just kind of regular mains menu, because I talked to someone later in the week and they said they had the filet mignon and they said it was incredible. So I was like, oh darn, I should have had like something like that instead. But oh well, live and learn. But yeah, the views were well worth it. The reason why I did the reservation was you can go to just the observation deck up on the Marina Bay Sands, but you still have to pay $38 to do that. And I was like, I would rather go to a restaurant where you have the same view and you can put that $38 toward food. So I did that instead, and then wandered around kind of the balcony after I'd finished my meal, got some photos of the harbor side of it, and then also onto like the Marina Bay side as well. Got some of the views of the city and the racetrack, and you could see the infinity pool that's on the Marina Bay Sands, and just kind of got a view of all of that, and that was very cool. So after I finished my meal and was done soaking up the view, I went back to the Gardens by the Bay for the light show at the Super Trees. I wandered into that area and it was super busy. There was a ton of people around already and it seemed like all of the spots were used up, but I managed to find one little slice of space between two friend groups and I was like, hey, can I sit here? And they're like, yeah, sure. So I only had to wait like 10 minutes, got like an ideal spot. It was great. Sometimes I love solo traveling because you can get away with so much. And so I just kind of laid back and watched the show. It was very, very cool. Highly recommend going to this. And it's free as well. Like it's in the section of the gardens that isn't contained. So yeah, there's no cost to go see the Super Trees at all, which I was actually super surprised by. There is like an observation tower, and then there's what they call the Sky Bridge, I think, which you do have to pay for, and I ended up doing that later on. But for actually seeing the show, you can just stay on the ground and look up and watch it. So I'll put a little clip of it in here. And then after watching that, I headed back to where the cloud forest was to look at the other dome, which was the flower dome. This one wasn't quite as good. Like I said earlier, I'm not a huge vegetation girly. And so it just kind of had a bunch of different sections with different plants from around the world. So they had like an Australia section, a North America section, an Africa section. And then they kind of had an exhibit in the main level. It seemed to be kind of Dutch Christmas market themed. Wasn't quite sure what was going on there, but that was kind of interesting. But by this point, my feet were absolutely dead. My back was killing me. I looked on my phone later and I had walked 20 kilometers this day. So my feet were blistered to pieces and my back was screaming at me, which, yeah, I definitely regretted that. So yeah, headed back to the hotel after this and had a nice shower and then straight to bed. And that was kind of the last day before the Grand Prix happened. So, track days. I had intended, when I was planning my trip to Singapore, to do something in the mornings before the on-track action started. But with all of the walking that I had done and completely destroying my back, I was worried that if they went too hard in the mornings, it would ruin my experience at the track in the evening. So all 3 of the days on track, I ended up just staying in my hotel room for the morning, just grabbing breakfast and kind of just taking it easy, staying off my feet, and kind of resting, which is something that I kind of am a bit bummed about. Maybe I'll go into my last day in Singapore first before I go through the Grand Prix stuff. So the Monday I was also in Singapore, and so for that day I kind of just went back and saw a few of the things that I felt I had missed during my trip. So I went and walked the rest of the waterfront area that I didn't get to on the first day and kind of went from where I had been on day 1 where Shake Shack was, and then I went kind of all the way along the waterfront area and then over to the Marina Bay Sands and looked at like the shops and went to the Apple store there. Very, very neat Apple store. Would highly recommend making a stop there. It's in this like giant ball that kind of hangs out over the marina. Yeah, and then it connects to the mall by an escalator that kind of goes to like the more general store area. So they kind of had like the testing things area in the ball and then just the store itself kind of in the section below. But it was very, very cool. But yeah, I just kind of wandered around that mall a little bit. I also went back to Campon Glam to see it in a more kind of hustling and bustling time. I also went back to the gardens and did the walkway up above and got some more photos of that. Yeah, in terms of seeing Singapore itself, I wish I would have had another 2 days on the trip, just so that I would have one more day to kind of rest and relax. Because I think I needed a day after the Grand Prix to kind of sit down and just rest my back and kind of heal up in a way. Because I just never really had a break for most of the trip, and I think that was why I got into trouble. And plus, like the first 2 days, I was just so jet lagged that I wasn't fully able to do as much as I wanted. So there were a few things that I missed out on. I feel like I missed out on going to the night safari. I missed out on seeing a lot of Chinatown because I only really saw it in the tour that we did, which wasn't very much of that area. And so I wish I would have had more time to go there. I wanted to see more hawker centers, but I really only managed to hit like 2 of them on my trip. And then I think there was another museum that I kind of wanted to go to that I didn't get to. I think I had thought that having 4 days would be enough, but really it was only 2 because of the jet lag. So I think that for the amount of time that I went to Singapore, like I was only there for like a week in like time without counting travel time. And just for the amount of jet lag that I went through, it just didn't feel like a long enough trip to really make it worth it. So I would say that if you're going to Singapore, make it at least 10 days if you're going for the Grand Prix itself, because you're probably going to need at least 2 days to handle the jet lag. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I felt about it. So maybe I'll go back in the future and be able to see some of the things that I'd missed, but I think that was definitely a regret. And the fact that my back was hurting a lot too was a big factor in that limited the amount of things that I could see. Moving on to my experience at the actual Grand Prix. So I cannot believe how lucky I got with my tickets. I kind of booked this pretty last minute and I looked around at a lot of different places for tickets and I was very set on sitting on the main straight. So I wasn't tempted to buy kind of anything that was available still on the official website. And so I was looking at a lot of third-party websites. And I ended up committing to some tickets from StubHub, which not always the most reputable and not always successful in getting the tickets. And so I was so worried about it. But luckily, pretty quick after I bought them, the person who had them was able to transfer them to me. And it was all done in the actual Singapore GP app. And so as soon as I got the tickets in the app, I was pretty certain that everything was going to go okay. I did have a minor scare when the Singapore GP posted on their Twitter page that anyone caught having bought tickets from a third party like StubHub would not be granted access to the circuit. But I was like, oh my God, like what do I do? But at that point it was too late and I figured I had them in the app. I doubt they're going to be suspect of something like that. So everything went okay. But yeah, that was a bit nerve-wracking for sure. I did have to pay like quite a bit above cost for them. So I think cost, they were like 1,300 Singapore dollars and I ended up paying about 2,100 Canadian, which is a pretty hefty price for one weekend, but I was just like, whatever. I'm flying to Singapore for this thing, like I'll go all out. And I was so set on sitting on the main straight. So I was like, this is kind of the price I'm gonna have to pay to do that. Very pricey. So would recommend getting them on the initial release if you can. But since I had bought them through StubHub, I didn't really have any choice of where they would be on the main straight. It was kind of just like wherever those tickets ended up being was what I would get. So I could have been near the starting lights, or I could be at the opposite end. And I cannot believe how perfect my seats were. They were straight across from Oscar Piastri's garage, within view of the podium, like just a little bit offset from the finish line, and I had view of both Ferrari garages. Literally could not get any more perfect, and I was just so stoked. So I honestly spent most of the weekend sitting in my seats, even though there was a lot of stuff going on around the track. But yeah, I was in awe. Very, very thankful that that worked out. I think I've gone into this in other videos, but my philosophy when it comes to picking where to sit on tracks, I've kind of decided is based on whether the track is good for overtaking or not. If it's good for overtaking, I think that's when I would want to be in either GA or at a corner that's known for being an overtaking zone, which I did for Canada, being at turn 1 for that race. But Singapore, since it's not really known for overtaking, I was like, okay, maybe this is a good track to kind of get the main straight experience on. So that's kind of how I made that decision. Plus, I wanted to be in zone 1 so that I would have access to the wharf stage, which is where the drivers had their fan forum. And also they had a few other concerts there. And I was able to kind of go through all 4 zones with these tickets rather than being in a zone 4 grandstand where you only have access to zone 4, and so you wouldn't get access to other things. So it was important for me to have that for this race. Yeah, so on the Friday for practice day, I ended up getting to the circuit right when it opened, or a little bit before. So I think I got there at around 1:30 and the gates opened at 1:45. And I went for gate 2, which I think unfortunately is probably the busiest gate at Singapore. Like the lineup was crazy long and it wasn't really fully organized yet, so they didn't really have enough those little like barrier fencing that they use for queues, and so they just like made us wind in like this big open space to get into the track. And so it took me a solid like hour just to get into the track from that line, and I got there fairly early and it was even longer behind me. So I decided after that day, I was like, ooh, I should probably try one of the other gates for future days. So maybe avoid gate 2 if you're ever going to the track. Yeah, so got onto the circuit. The Porsches at that point were having their practice session. I wasn't super interested in watching any of the Porsche race, and even the F1 Academy, I only managed to catch the qualifying session. Like the races were earlier in the day usually, and I was just trying to stay out of the heat, and so didn't really catch much of it. Or I was at the F1 driver fan forum, like standing there in the crowd waiting for the drivers, and kind of missed the races because of that, which is a bit of a bummer because I would have loved to watch those races in full, but yeah, I just had more important things on my mind. So yeah, so the main thing that I wanted to be there for Friday for was the fan forum, because in Canada they didn't really do a good job of this, honestly. The stage was really tiny. They didn't really announce when any of the drivers would be there. And then the Saturday session, they ended up canceling because of rain. So I was like really determined to see all the drivers this time around. And yeah, I'm super stoked about the Friday because that day I think they brought out the V-Carb and Sauber drivers first and just kind of had a chat with them. They did like the reaction timing thing on the wall, and then they brought out my two favorite drivers at the same time. So they had the Williams and Ferrari came out together, and so they chatted to Alex, Carlos, Lewis, and Charles. And this was my first time seeing in person Carlos, Lewis, and Charles. Alex I had seen in Canada before. And like, yeah, all three of them very, very attractive individuals. But I was a bit of a distance away, and they just kind of chatted to them. They gave Charles the overtake trophy for his overtake at Zandvoort. And then they brought a couple fans on stage and had them ask the drivers some questions.
Have you seen one of these lizards out there on the track?
I thought you were going to say something more personal.
Do you know something? Something personal that happens when you meet a race.
Okay, well, so you guys know, right? When the air comes over the car, it sucks the air out the cockpit. So sometimes you're following someone and you smell the worst smell, and you're like, the guys, someone ahead definitely farted. So I've had that many, many times. I don't know if you've had that.
Unless you are in Vegas and you just smell weed.
Yeah, so that was very fun and cute, and yeah, they were all just kind of making fun of each other and stuff, so it was kind of good to watch their interactions and finally laid eyes on. But yeah, and then after that was supposed to be both McLaren drivers, but at this point I had been standing at the stage for like 2 hours and my back was killing me. And so this is the recurring theme of the weekend where, yeah, I just needed to find somewhere to sit and couldn't deal with being in that crowd anymore with the heat and humidity, and I felt like I was about to pass out. So I wandered a ways away, and they had this area called the Sail Zone, I think. And they had like this big tent, and it had these huge fans in it. And so I found a seat in there and then sat in the cool wind for like a half an hour, and kind of listened to, well, it ended up, I guess Lando had been under the weather on that Friday, and so it was only Oscar, but I had seen him in Canada before, so I wasn't super fussed about missing him. And then I think Aston Martin came out after, and apparently it was Stroll and Van Dorn. Wouldn't been fussed to see them, so I was kind of fine that was how it worked out. So yeah, so that was good. And then after that, I hunted down for some food. They had like a really big food court area in Zone 1, which was good. They had like a few different options there, but it was always super busy whenever I was there. So I kind of wandered down towards where my seats were, which were in a bit of a like less busy area, and there was shorter lines for food and for washrooms and water. So I ended up just getting some like salt and pepper chicken and French fries, which a little bit overpriced, but I was just like, whatever. Yeah, and then I went to my seat and watched FP1, which was good. One thing I did do was bring binoculars, which was super great because I could really zoom into what was happening in the garages. So I had I had a direct sight into Oscar, so I was able to watch Oscar like chatting with his engineers and when he got in and out of his race car and when he was kind of prepping at the back of his garage. So that was good. And then Lewis, I could kind of see just like a little bit of his cockpit and his car, and then Charles, I could see kind of his whole like back wall and then his car. I didn't really have a super direct line of sight into them, but I was able to watch when they like come in and out of the garage and just a little bit of discussions happening and stuff. So yeah, bring binoculars if you're ever on the main straight because you can kind of look around and get a better view of things. Yeah, so that was good. Not much happened in FP1, I think. And then one thing I did do was I stopped by the first aid tent because of my back, and I was like, can you guys give me any like pain medication? Because I hadn't brought any with me that day. So they were able to give me some paracetamol to kind of help with my back. So if you're ever at an F1 race and you have like a headache or something, like the first aid does have drugs that you can take, which was very good to know. So shout out to the first aid tents at Singapore for helping me out there. I luckily brought my own meds the next 2 days, so I didn't have to head back there for more, but yeah, I definitely needed that. Oh yeah, and Alonso was the top driver in the FP1. That was pretty wild, and everyone was getting super hyped about that. And it convinced me to wear my Aston Martin bucket hat the second day. So I was like, ooh, maybe he'll do well in qualifying. And then I don't think he ended up doing that well, but still, it was kind of exciting, a return to 2023 a little bit. Okay, and then after that session finished, then it was the F1 Academy qualifying, which I was able to hang around for. I believe Maya Woog qualified on pole, and I think she ended up winning the championship by the end of the weekend. So that was good for her. FP2 was where all the chaos happened. We had George crashing in a turn and losing his front wing. And then we had Liam Lawson clipping the outside wall, going around the penultimate corner. And then he kind of like rolled into the pit lane a little bit. And then everyone was confused about how to get into the pit lane with the red flag. And then after that stoppage, we saw Lando and Charles collide in the pit lane, like right in front of us. And there was like a crash and then a ooh from the crowd. It's very funny. Classic Ferrari. Everyone was a little bit worried that Charles would get a grid penalty for it, but I think they got away lucky with just a fine for that one. So, and then something I was surprised about with Singapore is they actually allow everyone onto the track like at the end of the sessions on every day. In Canada, they only allowed you on track after the race finished, but here it was after after the final session and every day. So they opened up the track after FP2, and I was able to kind of wander onto the main straight and get some photos. I went and kind of looked at some of the garages a little bit further down the grid, so I got some nice views of the Mercedes pit boxes and Red Bulls, and closer view of the Ferrari and McLaren ones. And I got a photo just by the finish line. And then after this, I decided to wander down the track to get to the Padang stage, which is where they have the big kind of headliner music acts. So the first day on the Friday was G-Dragon, who I believe he was a member of a K-pop group. I'm not sure. I'm not super aware of much that goes on in the K-pop world, but definitely had a lot of fans, and I couldn't figure out how to get closer to the stage. I learned later that they had kind of barricades and gates to kind of control the amount of people that were in close to the stage, and so you kind of had to find your way kind of down the right or left hand sides to find an opening in the gate to be able to get in there. And I didn't know this on that first day, and so I was like, oh my god, there's so many people here, I can't even get close to the stage. So at that point I was also feeling pretty tired, so I headed home and straight to bed. So that was kind of the Friday. Then the Saturday happened, and so this day I decided, okay, I'm going to try and get to gate 1, which is closer to the wharf stage, and kind of the northernmost gate. So I managed to find the route there, and the line was so much shorter. Oh my god. So I don't think many people use that entrance to get in, because it's not really close to very many of the grandstands, really only like turn 1, turn 2. So if you're going to Singapore, I think that might be the gate to enter in. It's just a lot more smooth sailing. And so I was able to get in there, and then I went and bought some merch. So I bought my own Ferrari hat, which was so expensive, but I was like, ugh, I'm here. I'd have to pay for shipping if I bought it in Canada, and I really wanted a Charles hat. So I was like, ugh, whatever, screw it, I'll just buy it. And I really liked their hats this year. Like, it was a little bit more kind of detailed and kind of neat looking. So I got that. And then I also bought a hat for my friend who is a George Russell Mercedes fan. I guess the Amex partners with F1, so I managed to also acquire a handheld fan. I had already brought one to Singapore with me, but it was nice to have one that had like a cooling feature on it. But yeah, if you are in Singapore, handheld fan, #1 item to get. It saved my life several times, especially standing in that crowd waiting for the drivers for the fan forum. Like having that thing going on your face just helps so much with keeping you cool. So yeah, the big tip, bring one of those. They're pretty cheap on Amazon. You can buy them, and they're just like USB plug in to charge, and they lasted pretty long. Like I think I got like a full day's worth out of both of them. So yeah, highly recommend that. So then after I bought the merch, I headed straight to the fan forum zone. First up was the Alpine boys and the Red Bull boys, which was very fun because you had Yuki and Pierre kind of making jokes at each other, and Max kind of chipping in. It was a lot of talking about gin and tonics.
Explain why Max is gin and tonic. Because you called Daniel Ricciardo you mentor and Pierre Gasly as brother. So why gin and tonic? For anyone who doesn't know.
He's the one who introduced me first to gin tonic. It's airplane, probably as you guys know. And, probably that was one of the best gin tonic I ever had. So and we had a nice drink in the airplane, and yeah, it was good.
And is that a good nickname to have, Max?
I actually think it. I mean, I love gin tonic, so. Chris, you remember that night, Yuki?
They also brought out some fans to ask more questions, and yeah, just a lot of fun. I think Max, like, he's very relaxed, which was something that was kind of surprised. Like, he just was kind of making jokes all the time, and even though he was in front of a crowd of people, it didn't really seem to bother him that much, which I think for some of the other drivers, it seemed like they were a lot more kind of hush-hush. Like, I even, like, with Charles, was kind of a bit quiet when he was up on the stage. So yeah, that kind of surprised me a little bit. It was neat to see them in person. Max also lots kind of smaller. Like, all of them seem very much like smaller in person. TV definitely adds 10 pounds or whatever they say. And then after them, they brought out the Haas boys along with Lando, which was really good of him actually to reschedule his fan appearance, because I'm sure a lot of people were disappointed when he didn't show up on the Friday, but the Saturday he was there and was able to kind of kiki with the Haas boys a bit. They did the reaction time thing as well, but they did all three of them working on the same one, so it was kind of funny, and it wasn't working very well, and so they're all just kind of making jokes about that, so that was kind of fun. And then finally was the Mercedes boys, and honestly, they brought the most energy of anyone. Kimi came out with, he had like one of those like long sticks with like the 360 cameras on it, and he was kind of like putting that out in the crowd and trying to hype up the crowd, and he was collecting like bracelets from people. And then George was also there kind of making jokes and bringing the energy and like pointing out to fan signs and stuff.
I'm loving all of the signs you've got down here, especially this one here. You need to hold this up, spin it round so the rest of the people can see this amazing spin it around for the people. Let's go!
And they just seemed like, yeah, they just had so much energy and really like drew from the crowd and kind of gave it back. And I was just so surprised by that. That wasn't really what I was expecting from them. And I think both of them just have a lot of riz, which isn't something I was expecting from George, but yeah, that was surprising, and they were definitely the highlight of the fan forum. Like, even though I was really excited to see the Ferraris and Carlos and Alex, like, but yeah, I think the Mercedes were the most fun. They also did one of those like guess who said what radio message, and a lot of them were like old Singapore radios. They had like Fernando in one and one for Carlos, which was kind of funny that George kind of was taking the piss on that one. So yeah, just like really funny, and they really gave it to the crowd. So I think they were my favorite pairing of the weekend. And I think I really noticed this year that I think I've started to appreciate George a lot more than I used to. I'd kind of been a bit of a George hater in the past, but I think he's been bringing a lot of energy and a lot of drama, and he's a really funny guy. And I think that's something that's kind of been missing since Daniel stepped back, was like, who's kind of going to bring the humor and and all that kind of stuff. And I think George is kind of starting to step in and take that role a little bit. And yeah, just like, I think I still don't really like him. Like, he just gives off such like lawyer, politician, goody two shoes, class president energy, which is usually the type of person that I don't really get along with super well. But I think I can just appreciate him more as a person, even if I wouldn't personally like get along with him very well, I don't think. But I don't know him, so you just never know. But yeah, I appreciate the energy that he's bringing to F1. I'll say that. And then after the fan forum finished, I think it was another one of the PSC races, but instead of watching it in my seat, I decided I would go over to the Singapore Flyer. And the Singapore Flyer is actually within the zone of the F1 race. And so while the race is on, the general public doesn't have access to be able to go on to the Ferris wheel. And so they actually give anyone who has an F1 ticket complimentary rides on the Flyer. And they didn't even check like how many times you go. So you could go on it as many times as you wanted. So I only ended up going on it the once during the Saturday. But yeah, it's air conditioned, so it was nice to get out of the heat, and you just got such good views of Singapore. And also, since I went in it while the PSC race was happening, I was able to get photos of cars on track while I was going up and around. So it was very, very cool to see that. I didn't really check how expensive it is. I don't know if I would have paid for it if it wasn't included in the ticket price, but I think it's just one of the things that really made the Singapore GP worth it. Because I think like you look at it and it's like double the price of what Canada was for me. Like maybe even triple. And then I paid an additional surcharge on top of that because I bought my tickets late from StubHub. But I truly felt like even though I paid that amount of money, I got my money's worth from the tickets because I had excellent seats. You got the free Singapore Flyer tickets, and then you got access to like 3 headliner concerts and then a bunch of other small concerts if you would have wanted to go to them. And so like adding all of that up, it does make the price of the ticket worth it. And especially the 2 headliners that were Saturday and Sunday, like I would probably have spent at least 250 Canadian to go to either one of those concerts. And so like adding that into the cost of the ticket and doing girl math, like honestly, I do feel like it was worth the price that I paid. Which was not something I was expecting to say. But all around, just the fan experience was just so much better at Singapore than it was at Montreal. Like night and day. Just like people, the marshals and they had a lot of like ushers around to kind of help direct people. And when you're walking on the track to get to the Padang stage, they're all cheering on the track. They had formed like a long line that you could like run through and high five all of them. And they're just like, thank you, bye. And they're just all so friendly and so nice. And it's just like little things like that really make your fan experience. And yeah, just really well organized. They had signage everywhere. It was really easy to get around. They had a ton of washrooms. And so if one area was really lined up, you could just walk a little ways away and you'd find another set of bathrooms that were not as busy. Same thing with water fountains. They provided water fountains everywhere, which I don't recall that being the case in Canada, even though it was cooler in Canada. So it wasn't as big of a deal, but you'd have to just constantly be buying drinks in Canada versus they had all of this free water everywhere in Singapore. And yeah, just like really, really well done event. And they've clearly really perfected how to do it. And it just really, really impressed me. So yeah, highly recommend it. Okay, moving on to the Saturday. So I did the Singapore Flyer and then I had to rush back to my seats for the start of FP3. That was kind of a boring session. FP3 still feels like a useless session to me. And so it's kind of why I wouldn't be mad if they changed to having way more sprint races, because it just like, what's the point of 3 practice sessions? But then I made a massive, massive mistake, and that mistake was going for food after FP3. It was so busy. Every single food stall was just like the longest lineup we've ever seen. And so I went back to that like main food area and ended up getting like a pita wrap, which was really good. It was actually probably my favorite meal that I had on track, but it was super lined up. They ended up running out of all options except for prawn, which luckily I was going to get the prawn anyway, so that kind of worked out. But yeah, it was just such a long line, and I picked the peak time to go. And so I think if you're wanting to get food, maybe go off peak. So either go before the first F1 session or after the second one. Although after the second one, they might be closed, or during the session, maybe even would be better. But yeah, so that was kind of unfortunate, but I did get to kind of sit and eat my food and enjoy one of the concerts from a distance. I think it was maybe Crowded House. I hadn't heard of them, but yeah, it was kind of nice to just sit there, listen to live music, and eat your food. And then it was back to the stands for qualifying, which qualifying is a session where I think I prefer watching it online because of the timing data. It's just so difficult to follow what is going on when you're on track. And I didn't like, I would try to bring up the data on my phone, but there wasn't enough cell coverage, and so it just wasn't working. And I was just like, ugh, okay, I guess I'm just gonna have to like try and figure out what's happening. It ended up being a bit of a boring session, especially for Singapore, where it's kind of way more dependent on qualifying. You're hoping that that would make that session more exciting, but I don't think we had any shock exits from Q1 or Q2. And then in Q3, George ended up setting his fast lap in the first set of runs, and then like no one improved in the second set.
Max is the threat. Oscar's not going quicker, but Max is. But chasing Lando Norris down.
Checkered flag for Oscar Piastri, stays third for now. What happens to Verstappen here?
It's close. I don't think it's going to be enough though. Max Verstappen.
Oh, he slowed down. So it was really anticlimactic, which was a bit of a disappointment. So I think in Canada, qualifying was my favorite session, but I think unfortunately here, it wasn't quite as good. But still got to watch everything kind of happening in the garages with drivers coming in to change tires, and you could kind of get a glimpse of like the post-quali interviews happening, and yeah, was fun. I think the highlight of this day though was the Singapore Flyer. I think seeing that was cool. And then after that session was done, I headed down to the track, and I met someone from South Korea who had come to the race, and it was their first F1 race. They had gotten into F1 by watching the F1 movie. So there you go. That's kind of part of the reason why F1 did that. It was to get new fans into the sport. And so I was talking to this girl, and she didn't really know much about the sport, was really surprised about the format of qualifying, and talked to her about her favorite drivers and kind of her experience so far. And yeah, it was really nice to kind of meet a new friend there. So I told her about being able to go on track after the session, and so we did that, and then kind of took some photos of each other on the main straight, and then walked around the track to get to the Padang stage again, where this time it was Foo Fighters, which was very exciting. They are a band that I have heard of and know quite a few of their songs, so it was neat to see that and see Dave Grohl head it now. So he's surprisingly a really good singer. Yeah, so watched a bunch of those songs. Although, bit of a funny story. I was convinced that the last song they were going to play was Iris. Come to learn after the fact, Foo Fighters are a different band than the Goo Goo Dolls. I think it's the Foo in the Goo that got me confused. So I was really disappointed initially that they didn't play Iris until I learned that no, that is a different band that performs that song, Robin. but did see My Hero and a few of their other big hits, and so that was really cool to see, and definitely had the crowd rocking out to them. So, and they played the most of the three artists, had a lot of energy and brought it to the crowd, so that was good. And then it was during this performance that I learned about being able to get kind of closer to the stage, so I got a much better viewpoint for this concert than the G-Dragon one. And then also I was able to find, they open up a separate gate to leave the circuit after it's done, and it was like the perfect one to get back to my hotel. I was able to get onto the street that my hotel was on and then just straight walk it. And so it was nice to be able to just head right home after the race session. So definitely picked a great location for my hotel for the trip. So that was good planning by me, because I would have hated to have to like plan to get to the MRT before it closed for the day, and then it would be packed and full of people. And so yeah, it was great to be like super close to the circuit. So would recommend doing that if you are thinking of going to the Singapore Grand Prix. Yeah, and then finally the race day. I really hung around my hotel room that morning. I was feeling so tired from being in the sun the last 2 days, especially with like the fan forum, and so I really hung around the hotel and read a bit, got caught up on some TV, and just took it easy. So I headed to the track kind of late this day, which I ended up missing the F1 Academy race, which I kind of regret a little bit. I wish I would have gone a little bit earlier to be able to watch that and watch Maya Woog wrap it up. But I did manage to catch it kind of standing in a GA area as I was walking to my seats. And yeah, I was very determined to see the pre-race commotion on the main grid, because that was the whole reason why I wanted to get the main straight tickets, was to be able to watch people kind of wandering up and down, the mechanics, the drivers, celebrities. And so I went to my seat and watched the driver parade, which honestly is always a little bit disappointing. They always put them in like the singular cars, which I suppose is better in a way, because it kind of like drags it out, and then they can kind of focus on waving to the crowd instead of just chit-chatting with the other drivers. But it just like feels like you can never get a good enough view of them. From there, like the fencing's just super in the way, and there's just everyone's standing and cheering and holding up signs. You're trying to like poke your head around. It's just like, yeah, if you want to get a good view of the drivers, I think the fan forum is the way to go, and the driver parade's just like cheer for them as they go past, but you're just not gonna get a good line of them. And then after the driver parade, I was debating about heading to the wharf stage because Smashing Pumpkins was going to have a concert, but it was kind of overlapping with the time that the drivers would be preparing on the grid, and I was just like, I really just don't want to miss that. And the thing I was there for was F1, so I ended up skipping the concert, which was a bit of a bummer. I wish that it would have been at a different time of the weekend, because then I would have definitely made sure I went, but yeah, I think I kind of had to prioritize F1 in that moment and stick around for that. So yeah, and definitely the pre-race stuff was one of the highlights of the weekend for me. It's just so chaotic. There's so much happening. I had my binoculars out looking at Yuki dealing with his engineers. We had Lance Stroll right in front of us, which was such a bummer when Williams got disqualified, because they would have been right by us, which would have been so fun. But instead it was Lance Stroll. Yeah, and then you'd see like them kind of going through the pit lane as they were doing their reconnaissance laps, and then once they go onto the grid, they stop and they get put onto the wheels and brought through the grid. And so I got to watch like the two Ferraris go past, and Max and the McLarens, and then they all went for the anthems, and then saw like Lewis scooting around on his scooter with Angelo running after him. We saw Scotty, I can't remember his last name. He's the snowboarder who's married to Chloe Stroll. And we saw the anthem, and then watched the drivers all get their helmets on and hop into the cars. So I was able to watch Yuki and Isaac and Lance all do that. And yeah, and then we were ready for the start of the Grand Prix. So I kind of had a strategy with the race. They did have like a screen that you could watch on the main straight. So I'd be watching that for the start and when they were all kind of on the other side of the track. And then as soon as they would start coming around the last corner, I would whip my head that way and watch them go past. I think one thing that I had been missing from my experience when I was in Montreal was really understanding how fast these cars are going, because when you're in a turn, you can't really appreciate it because they're going slow. And so on the main straight, you fully understand how fast these cars go and they just zoom past you and it's like impossible to get good video of them. They're like whoop every time. And that was enlightening to see. And yeah, so there wasn't much action happening on the main straight as always, but yeah, that's just kind of how Singapore was and why I wanted to sit on the main straight, because I wasn't going to be worried about missing too much action. But unfortunately, F1 TV had one of their worst races ever. Like, they just missed so much stuff. And so it wasn't just on the broadcast, like whatever they were showing on the track TV screens was the same thing. So we just had no idea what was going on in the race. Like, we saw the radio about Lewis having brake issues and I saw him go super slow past us on like the second to last lap. And I was like, ooh, does Lewis have an issue? But like, they didn't say anything about it. We couldn't really hear the commentators very well. And then you had Carlos making up a ton of positions, didn't show any of that. So like, I really felt like I did not understand anything of what had happened in this race. Like, it was very focused on the front and you could see kind of the gaps between each car as they went past. But other than that, it was difficult to understand what was happening in the race. So a bit of a bummer that it ended up being such a stinker, but still it was cool to see in person and I definitely had a great experience. Yeah, and then after the race finished up, we saw the podium, George, Max, and Lando, which three of my least favorite drivers. So I saw the podium in Montreal that I saw was the most decorated podium ever because it had Max, Lewis, and Fernando on it, plus Adrian Newey. And then this podium was my least favorite podium. So maybe at my next race, I'll have my favorite podium ever with my three favorite drivers. A girl can dream. So yeah, so that was kind of interesting to see. Could see them spraying each other with champagne and couldn't really see much of the driver interviews. I think they were really behind a bunch of fencing and there's like the tower where they have the flag waver in, and so you couldn't really see too well to where they were doing that, unfortunately. And then we saw the McLaren celebrations afterwards, which we later learned did not feature Oscar Piastri. So yeah, a little bit bummed about that. Yeah, and then after all that happened, the racetrack was packed full of people because they had let them on to watch the podium ceremony, and so they weren't really letting anyone else on after that. And so I was like, oh, I really want to like get onto the track and hang around and see if any of the drivers come out to kind of wave to the fans. So I hung around in the grandstand for a little bit until it started to kind of clear out, and then I managed to make my way to where the gap in the fencing was, and they were like, no, we're not letting anyone else on, but there were still people waiting there that were kind of getting on, so I just kind of snuck my way in there because I was like, I am determined to get on this track. So managed to get on there, and then I kind of hung around the Ferrari garages and the McLaren one. You could kind of see like them chit-chatting to the McLaren people just because there's celebrating the world constructors, and so like I'd see like Andrea Stella and saw them kind of having chats. So we hung around, and then they started having some of the ushers and security start to try to push people off of the main straight because they were closing the track, and everyone was like, no. And so we were still hanging around there like waiting, and then we saw Lewis come out kind of behind the Ferrari barriers, and he was chatting to one of his engineers, and he kind of gave us a wave from a distance, and we're like, yay! And then he kind of disappeared behind the screens, and so we're all chanting, Lewis, 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 and like cheering and waving, and as all of this is happening, the security team is like right next to us trying to push us away. We're like, Lewis, Lewis. And eventually he came out and blessed us with his presence and got into one of the gaps in the fencing. And it was literally like 10 feet away from me. And so I'm just looking up at Lewis, and it was like he was like this ethereal being in front of me. And I was like, this is what people felt like when they see gods and kings in the past. And so you're just looking up at him in awe and like, wow, like look at this human being, this incredible human being. And yeah, I was just so cool for him to come out and see the fans. He was only the only driver that ended up coming out and saying hi. And I just really appreciated that, especially since he was kind of going through a lot that weekend with Roscoe having to be put down and didn't have a very good race because of the brake failure at the end and the penalty that he got. So we lost another position to Fernando. And yeah, just like the fact that he still came out and said hi to the fans, even after going through all that, was just so meaningful. And I think that was easily the highlight of the whole trip for me, was just to be able to kind of see him up close like that. And yeah, just really, really, really special. So yeah, really thankful for that. And I don't know if the drivers really come out all that often. Like Charles always will at Monza, obviously. But yeah, I wasn't fully expecting it. Like no one did in Canada when I went there. But Lewis did this time, and I'm just so thankful to him for doing that. And yeah, and after that, with the security really pushing us along, so we kind of made our way down, and I got to see all of the cars kind of sitting there in Parc Fermé, so got a few photos of those, and then kept making my way over to the Padang stage because I wanted to catch a little bit of the concert because it was Sir Elton John, which I was so surprised that he A is still performing and B is going to perform in the hot, humid Singapore weather. So I got there and made my way to near the stage like I had the night before, and managed to catch like 6 or 7 songs.
Yours are the sweetest eyes I've ever seen. You can tell everybody this is your song. It may be quite simple, but now that it's gone, I hope you don't mind, gotta put me down in the world. How wonderful life is while you're in the world.
Unfortunately, he had to end his set early because I think the heat did get to him and it looked like he was about to pass out. But we did catch a lot of his big hits like Your Song, Crocodile Rock, Cold Heart, I'm Still Standing. So it was so cool to see that. And he's such a legend, and to be able to say that I'd seen him in concert is very, very special. Yeah, that was very, very cool. I think my favorite of the 3 concerts for sure, even though it was a little bit shorter. Yeah, and then after that, I headed back to the hotel the same way that I had the night before. And I was thinking about going back out again afterwards because I did have a little bit more energy after seeing Lewis and seeing Elton John. I was like kind of buzzing a little bit, but I didn't want to overdo it, especially since I knew I wanted to explore a little bit more on the Monday. And so I just went to bed again after having a shower. But yeah, I think overall, just like, I think it was just such a fantastic experience all around. And I really, really recommend going. Even though it is a pricier GP, it's fully worth the price, in my opinion. I didn't really talk to anyone who had more GA tickets. I think I mainly talked to people in the grandstands, but I think the GA, they had like a lot of little like viewing areas. And it definitely seemed like Zone 1 was less busy than Zone 4 was. So I think if you were to do a GA, like a premium walk around would probably be the one to get. But that is even pretty expensive at like $500. And so, like, if you're going, you may as well spend the extra to have like an assigned seat in a stadium, in a grandstand, I think. But yeah, definitely make sure that you get one that has access to all four zones, because then you can get the Singapore Flyer access, you can get the Wharf Stage access, and you can get all the extra food options and still be able to go to the concert at the end of the night. So yeah, that was my experience at Singapore. But yeah, so the whole back issue was unfortunate, and that has led to issues that I'm currently experiencing where I might have irritated my sciatic nerve, which hasn't been great. I've had a lot of leg spasms and back pain and issues like that since I've been home, which hasn't been fun. Yeah, I definitely overdid it a few days there in Singapore, and I think it has finally caused my back to give out at the ripe old age of 30 years old. So, yeah, I've been going through that the past few weeks, which is why this has taken me so long to post. Yeah. Take care of your bodies, folks. It still felt like it was worth it, and I definitely needed a break. I'd been working nonstop for like 2-3 years, because I had to spend all of my holiday the year previous to finish my CPA exams, and so I was itching for a trip. So this was all around just a great experience, and yeah, I think 1 or 2 days more in Singapore would have made it more worth it, but yeah, highly recommend going to the city, highly recommend going to the Grand Prix. It was just a fantastic experience all around. So yeah, if you have any questions about going to Singapore, if you want any tips and tricks that I could maybe provide for the future, let me know in the comments down below. If you've been to the Singapore Grand Prix, did you enjoy your experience as much as I did? And yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you have, and I'll see you in the next one.